one of the things that we can do, and we're working on, is you can use a voice clone and then generate new audio in a different language that still retains the like texture of the actor's like voice and performance. And I think that's really exciting. And I think actors are going to be real excited when they hear about that, because it allows them some more control over their image, and they're like retains their likeness, which is a big thing.
I'm Sarah Nagel. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Verve.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how's it going? You're back in Cincinnati.
I'm back in Cincinnati. Yeah, I'm like a boomerang.
Where were you?
Less fun. Less fun. It's just a quick trip to New York.
Awesome.
So meeting with different agencies. We had a Google exec event, a luncheon, which I didn't know was still a thing, but it is.
Awesome. All right. Good to know. Well, I've just been playing around with the Verve platform this week and doing some really kind of cool experiments almost. So taking a lot of the, we gather a lot of insights through our campaigns for, a number of our clients, but then also have just been testing on our own. So collecting insights and then taking that information and creating agents from that information. So being able to train and create agents that can help me create, it could be text-based, data, or it could also be visualization. So I've been playing a lot with the visualization. So, you can even take like a quote from somebody and then turn that into a product idea, which is so cool. And, but then, so part of it, what I'm doing is really kind of taking those, that quote, but then also adding other things to it. So adding like style to that, or adding color, or adding a mood to see what the different outputs are. So it's been pretty cool. And it's really a unique offering that we have through Verve, which is really cool. I haven't seen anything else out there that's able to kind of go right from consumer to product idea, which has been cool.
Yeah, I love it. And I love seeing all the things you're visualizing, which normally, I don't know, would take a while and different, many more resources to get done. So,
oh my gosh, I wish I had tools like this when I was within large organizations, because it would have, sped up the process like crazy. So, and that's what we're trying to do for a lot of our clients. So we're excited to play with it and see what we can do.
Awesome.
All right. So coming up, we're going to be sharing an interview with Jack Payne. Jack is a cognitive scientist and PhD who's an expert in how the human brain interprets sound. He co-founded a company called Dialogger.ai, which helps production studios reproduce sound instead of having to re-record from scratch. So if some sort of, the sound gets messed up, you don't have to re-record. They're reproducing it with AI. So, Chad, I know you're going to be nerding out on a lot of sound and music conversations with Jack. So that's coming up. But let's check out what's in the headlines. So FKA Twigs, who is a British artist and musician, submitted an AI testimony to the Senate. She is basically creating her own deepfake, which feels like in defense of her own identity and kind of like of her artistry. So there's been a lot going on about people or artists worried about kind of ownership of their identity and their craft, and that being taken away by, AI being able to be, AI being able to reproduce that in different ways. So she's kind of taken a stand to be able to create her own deep fake to kind of protect that identity.
So who better to hear from than Twigs herself? So why don't we play a clip from the testimony?
AI cannot replicate the depth of my life journey, yet those who control it hold the power to mimic the likeness of my art, replicate it, and falsely claim my identity and intellectual property. This prospect threatens to rewrite and unravel the fabric of my very existence. We must enact regulation now to safeguard our authenticity and protect against misappropriation of our inalienable rights. In the past year, I have developed my own deepfake version of myself that is not only trained in my personality, but that can also use my exact tone of voice to speak many languages. These and similar emerging technologies are highly valuable tools. This, however, is all under my control, and I can grant or refuse consent in a way that is meaningful. What is not acceptable is when my art and my identity can simply be taken by a third party and exploited falsely for their own gain without my consent due to the absence of appropriate legislative control and restriction.
What are your thoughts on this? We've talked a little bit about this in different ways.
I know there's multiple layers to this. I think when we talked to Adam Dodge a while back just on how individuals can retain right over their their likeness, body, both from like a criminal side and a civil side, and where do laws come in here? Like one of the last sentences she said was around, we must enact regulation now to safeguard our authenticity and protect against misappropriation of our inalienable rights. I'm just curious around the word like inalienable rights.
How do you interpret that?
I had to look it up. It's just like what, just being transparent. I mean,
Yeah.
I know like what it means, but like what specifically was included in that, and these are essentially rights that can't be taken away from you. So there's essentially no laws that government can create that can take it away from you. And I think a lot of this is playing out obviously within Hollywood too, of just how actors' likeness and traits and voice, and obviously Jack will talk about kind of the voice stuff too in the interview. But I don't know.
Well, I think that it's because we don't have laws in place and we don't have, there isn't protection, currently. I think she's kind of taking the first step, which you could imagine a lot of other artists are going to do, where they step in, and whether it's like creating their own deep fake or creating kind of their AI likeness in different ways, whether it be through music or their actual visual likeness, to be able to put those and kind of protect those or train them in a certain way where they feel like they have more ownership. Because like you could imagine, someone that doesn't know her well or kind of know different artists well, or kind of they understand their depth of experience, like she talks about, and that they're creating those things, and it could be a misappropriation of who they are or how they want to express themselves. So this is I think just an interesting way to be able to kind of for the artist to step in and to be able to protect that for themselves. And maybe it's just kind of like a stopgap between the kind of like what's going to happen next, but it's a way for them to be able to step in and just own the AI version of themselves.
And can you, I guess, like how, I guess what's involved in creating a deep fake of yourself? Is it primarily creating your avatar and then it lives in a place and a platform? And I mean, how does that stop anybody from doing anything?
Well, I don't know if it stops anybody from doing anything, but maybe there's a way where it's like kind of this is like the authentic version of the AI where like, so say I was an artist and I was able to train it with, my music and my thoughts or, my poetry and the art that I love and things like that, where it becomes more meaningful version. And also if you get ahead of it where, kind of saying like, this is the first version of this deep fake, and maybe it's even just kind of letting people know that she's doing this. To so if there's someone that comes after, that it's not the authentic version of that deep fake.
It just seems like an opportunity where if you did have a platform where you could create the version of yourself that you wanted to put out there, similar to when we talked about agents a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
I mean, you can build an agent of yourself and all the knowledge that you want to share with it, how it's represented, the things it generates and creates, and you're in control of it. People can access it and use it, but you're in control of it.
Yeah, and if there's like some sort of authentication of that kind of original, AI too.
Right. Now, when we talked about this a few weeks ago in terms of like Spotify around artists, I know you were against using essentially like an AI to generate new content, new outputs from it. But what if Twigs created a virtual representation filled it with all of the music and ideas and notebooks and all different types of things and put it out there, and you were able to interact with it, not from a chatbot perspective, like I know a lot of authors have, but
Yeah.
what if it was creating sounds and music and rhymes for you?
Sure. That feels different because, Twigs has opened that door. I think for a lot of artists, they haven't said yes to that yet. So I feel like it feels better once the artist has kind of like approved that and also been part of that creation of that, version of themselves. That feels better because then there's probably some sort of monetization, associated with that. But yeah, I could definitely see that if there were more artists that got on board for that, and kind of allowing people to, play with their art, but they've kind of set the parameters on what that is, and they have say in that. So yeah, I can get on board with that for sure.
Consent's really important. I think the whole idea of retaining control is going to be extremely difficult because you're going to have many different forms of inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
And there's just no way to completely control it.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of gets back to something you were talking about a while back around like the imagery, where we were talking about how it's not like it's created by AI, it's more the like what's authentic or kind of, so maybe there's some sort of authenticity kind of, related to that, not necessarily like a watermark, but some sort of way to be able to trace this is actually coming from, this authentic place where it's coming from the artist, just so you can kind of trace it in some sort of way.
Yeah. Yep.
But,
I mean, I would say that's a huge business opportunity. Everything's shifting from linear to more experiential. I mean, it happened in music, it happened in TV, and I think it's happening in just entertainment in general.
all right. Next up, the Airhead video that was released by OpenAI Sora. I want to say this was like a couple months back, probably, where it was revealed that it wasn't purely the work of AI. I think there was like the thought, from the people that were a lot of people that were watching it, that it was like, there was a prompt that was put in and this movie was created. But it was revealed that a lot of the work was done by this production company called Shy Kids, who basically took the raw output from Sora. So there was a prompt, there was an output from Sora, but cleaned it up in a lot of different ways. I guess there were some like images of faces that were popping up on the balloon. They were color correcting. They were, removing lots of different types of things. But as you and I know from using these generative tools, it's no surprise, right?
No.
Where, it's when you're using these tools as a fantastic first draft or, kind of a way to get ideas out there. And there's always going to be some editing, just like we do with like the outputs with the images of, the products that we're creating. There, you go back, you play with the prompts in different ways, or there's Photoshop involved in some of these things before you deliver, which is exactly what's happening here. And I think I think there's kind of this gap between kind of the expectation of what people believe that AI can deliver right now, and also there's like the reality of there's a lot of human involvement. The humans, like the creative folks, have not stepped away from this entirely. We're still part of it.
100%, and I don't think that goes away for a long time, or we don't want it to go away. I think we are creative. We get to make a bunch of different choices. We can spot, we have taste, right? Computers don't necessarily have taste.
Yeah.
And as much as it's creating, you instantly can spot things that you want to change, tweak, and where you want to take it. So
yeah.
But I do agree. I think kind of the mainstream people who see that, we may have saw like the Gemini video kind of a while back as well, just assume that this is all magic and it's doing everything for you, and so therefore I'm fearing for my livelihood. And you and I know this, like that's not reality. The reality is all these tools help me get there a lot faster and do more.
Yeah.
But I still need to be involved.
Yeah. Especially if you want a really like detailed output. I think that, there, of course you can put something into, a prompt into Sora and get something out, but like to make sure that it's like really your vision, you're
Dialed
going to have
in,
to,
original. Yeah.
yeah, you're going to have to play with it for a while. All right, and last up is Gemini has created a shortcut using Chrome. I've been playing around with it a little bit. You basically type the @ sign with Gemini, and it goes directly to Gemini, so you can start to prompt right away. It doesn't go directly to the page, but like it's a shortcut to be able to cut to the link.
Yeah, this was kind of a long time coming. I think everybody was curious how Google would address some of the disruption that it's experiencing around really people going to OpenAI and using ChatGPT essentially as the new search. I think there's a lot of people who are starting their journey through quote unquote search, which is essentially is looking for answers, and just starting through, are you really looking for answers, or do you want an answer to the question? Yeah. And so I think that's the fundamental consumer shift that's happening with search, and why this is, I'd say, their initial answer to it. So it'll be exciting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask for you, what's your go-to? Like if you are kind of looking for, if you're going to, start chatting with a chatbot, where do you go? Which platform do you use other than Verve? Because I have been starting to use it more, but what do you use?
I kind of switch around. It depends what I'm trying to do. If I'm looking to create a little bit more of structured thoughts and ideas, I use Claude from Anthropic. It's just really great at summarization. If you need a basic starting point or like an outline, GPT is really good. If I'm trying to generate imagery, new concepts, ideas, things like that, trends, insights, I use our platform. I started out doing image, through, more of like a Dolly or Midjourney, those kinds of things. But I'm definitely seeing what we're putting out with the quality of the rendering. It doesn't look like a cartoon. It looks like an actual product. So I'm pretty delighted with, I guess, the path that we're going down. But, I definitely find myself kind of using this more. Obviously I'm biased on it, but I would use what was working really well for me, regardless if it was, for the intent. So, I just like that we're building all of those LLMs directly into the platform, so you can get kind of the best of both worlds all in one place.
Okay, now let's get to our interview with Jack Payne, who is the co-founder of Dialogger.ai and a cognitive scientist and PhD who's an expert in how the brain perceives sound. He'll be talking about his experience working with sound and also within large organizations. So, you excited?
I am. Let's go.
Let's do it. Hey, Jack, great to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Jack, what a setup behind you.
Yeah, this is the multifunctional music and science space I got rigged up.
I love it.
Yeah.
Doctor of Science and Sound? Is that?
Yeah, that works as a tagline. Yeah.
Okay. We're in your lab.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah.
So, Jack, you are a cognitive scientist with a PhD. First, how did you decide to get your PhD, and how would you explain to our audience what your expertise is?
So my background is in how the brain processes emotional information from music and language. I kind of arrived at that because, I've always been musically inclined, fascinated by sound. I speak a couple languages too. And when I was in college, I started doing the neuroscience track. So I studied cognitive science at college, and that was a very multidisciplinary thing. So it was like philosophy, computer science, biology, physics, kind of everything all at once. And that's always really fit well for me because I'm kind of broadly based rather than super deep on anything. So when it came time to think about career choices, doing neuroscience of music really piqued my interest and kind of fused a lot of my parallel interests into a single big jumble of science and art.
So you currently are the CEO and founder of Dialogger.ai, but prior to that, you've worked at a number of organizations. We worked together at VF Corporation.
Yeah.
You've also worked at some smaller organizations. So how did you apply your expertise within, large and small organizations?
Yeah. It's always a little bit different, and it kind of depends on the questions we're trying to answer. So there's a nice blend of like methodology I can bring from the science world in terms of like very rigorous experimental testing and design, as well as, bridging some of my like creative and scientific interests. So concepts from either music development or, neuroscience. So like one of the things we did for VF was to work on the sensory experience of stores. So we started thinking about what sort of music are we playing? Like, what's the lighting setup? How are we guiding people through the space in a meaningful way that actually enhances the experience and leaves them with a better like emotional resonance of that whole shopping experience? And the way we did that was, again, fusing questions of, you know, what are the best approaches? What is the best music to play for this brand versus that brand, at this store lighting versus that store lighting? And then rigging up a experimental design to actually validate those questions. And so that's always something like the task, is this blend of art and science again.
Yeah. So Jack, what were some of the learnings that you had? I mean, I know when I'm shopping, from store to store, just depending upon as soon as you walk in the threshold, right? So you're going to hit with a scent of like sandalwood or something, or the music is way up compared to other experiences. And just curious, some of those learnings that you had.
Definitely, you've hit on some good ones right there. Like, if the music is at the wrong volume, that's obviously a problem, because it can be an abrasive stimulus and actually like an irritant if it's so loud. But there's also an age interaction there. So like, what's too loud for someone, of our generation is not always going to feel so loud for someone who's 17 or something. So there's that. And there's also like, brand fit is a big thing. So if you walk into a store, say it's like a skate shop, but they're playing classical music, I mean, that's jarring. Maybe it'll work, but more likely it's going to drive people away, because it's an incongruence. And when these like different sensory stimuli are not like lining up to send the same message, it like increases cognitive load on a visitor. And then when you have more of that, you're asking them to basically think too much, and it's an irritant. Again, people want a smooth, consistent experience always.
Yeah, I mean, I remember taking my parents to Abercrombie like a long, long time ago, and it felt like they immediately wanted to get the parents out.
They're kind of a masterclass in getting parents out of the store.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, here, take my credit card, and I'll be next door looking at candles or something.
Yeah, I'll leave all the complex decisions to the kids. That's the right move.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit more about Dialogger.ai, and what is it? How did you get started into it?
So we're a startup working on essentially voice AI for Hollywood. So you've probably seen a lot of AI voices out in the media, especially in the last like year or two. It's kind of blown up. The thing is, a lot of them aren't really quite up to the standards of what needs to be done in like Hollywood productions. So we're trying to tackle that question. I have two co-founders, so I'm managing all the tech side, because that's my background is a lot of coding and science stuff. I have Jesse and Rob are the other two founders. Jesse's been working in post-production for Hollywood for like 15 years. He's been doing dialogue editing actually for Law and Order for the last few years. So he's
in
the thick of it.
We love Law and Order.
Oh yeah, everybody does. There's like, I think 8 or 9 shows like within the Dick Wolf extended universe. So that's huge. And Rob, the other founder, business background, and also another music producer. We all three are. He's been called the best vocal editor that the owner of Motown Records ever worked with. So basically, it came about. Jesse is working on Law and Order during the strike last year, and one of the things he does is called automated dialogue replacement. So anytime you have like a take, maybe the actor's face was doing the right thing, but like a car drove by in the background, and they ruined the audio for that. What has to get done is they get dragged into the studio later. It could be a week, it could be like months, like 6 months later, and they need to redo the line and like recreate their character's experience in that scene much later. Honestly, a lot of actors don't even like doing it, and it's very tedious for everyone involved. So they have to re-record the line, then go back in and find exactly where it is, line it up, and do all sorts of massaging to make the microphone that maybe the sound editor had sound like the ones that they had on set, and it's called automated dialogue replacement, but it's honestly extremely manual. So Jesse came up with the idea that we could actually expedite this process and save everyone a lot of headaches using AI if we can get the voice clones to be good enough. So that's the origin story for us, and we've kind of grown since then.
So if I'm listening to Stabler, he could be recording live, like out on the street or somewhere else.
Exactly, yeah. And it's one of those things where, like, once you see or get used to noticing the movie magic, you'll see it all the time.
Yeah,
and it's
I can imagine. And so, what are some of the clients that you're currently working with? So, are you isolated to Hollywood type studios, or are you working across lots of different industries?
That's where we've kind of started, and that's kind of our home base, because Hollywood's a very like closed system in a lot of ways still. So we've been working to get in good with them, working with like post-production houses, editors, some producers directly, and then people doing like localization and stuff.
What are the aspirations for Dialogger?
Honestly, the first thing we want to do is speed up this ADR process. Another thing, like I just mentioned, there's localization. So the way it's done currently is like an actor, gives a performance, and then if they want to have a dub in a different language, they go hire some other person to represent them in that language. But I've always felt that, okay, there's a perennial debate in the localized media community between subtitles or dubbing. I don't know where you guys fall, but I've always been big on subtitles because I need that audio to match the like the facial movements and stuff, and like the actual vocal texture of the actor. It's always been very jarring for me to see like sound that doesn't line up and like a vocal texture that doesn't match them at all.
Yeah.
So like one of the things that we can do and we're working on is you can use a voice clone and then generate new audio in a different language that still retains the like texture of the actor's like voice and performance. And I think that's really exciting. And I think actors are going to be real excited when they hear about that, because it allows them some more control over their image, and their like retains their likeness, which is a big thing in Hollywood.
Yeah, I remember watching the playlist, kind of like the founding of Spotify.
Yeah,
and it took me like one or two episodes, to get through or get comfortable with kind of the overdubbing, and I was like I just wanted to be absorbed into the story and the characters, and I just couldn't get it. It was just couldn't get past it.
Yeah, totally. It's like, as humans, we're very receptive to that audiovisual synchrony because movies are evolutionarily like at the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So like we've evolved to experience sound and face matching, and when that doesn't matching, it's like hitting at a very deep thing that's like jarring and unusual.
It doesn't feel real. Yeah, it doesn't
exactly.
feel real.
It takes you out of the moment, and that's, I don't know, that's not what the intent of making art is. It's supposed to bring you to a new space and let you experience something, not be like, oh, I was kind of there, and then Daniel X's voice is wrong.
It's just there was a lot about it was wrong, especially for a company that was all about sound and audio. It just didn't match up with me.
Jack, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your background as a cognitive scientist. I'm curious, what skill set are you bringing to Dialogger, and like what kind of conversations do you have with your co-founders, and kind of what kind of influence do you have there?
So it's kind of nice that we all speak the same language, because like we're all music producers, and like we've worked with sound a lot. I mean, most of our lives at this point, so we can communicate on that level. What I'm bringing specifically is a lifetime of. I started coding when I was like 5 because my dad's a programmer, so I've been around computers for as long as I could walk or read or something. And then I've been working with AI specifically for like the last 10, 15 years. Started in grad school, using it for data analysis for fMRI, like neuroscience studies. And
what's fMRI?
Oh, sorry, it's functional magnetic resonance imaging. So you might have like an MRI for like a busted kneecap or something. That's like taking a photo. fMRI tries to essentially take a bunch of those as you're doing a cognitive task, and it makes like a video of brain activity. So what it's actually measuring is like oxygen travel in the brain. The idea that the parts of your brain that are using more processing power are requiring more blood and more oxygen. So if you're seeing more oxygen travel to this portion when they're doing a certain task, like imagining moving their right hand or something, you can infer that, oh, this part of the brain is involved with that motor movement. So it's it's complicated. You get tons of data, and it requires a very delicate setups to do these experiments right. And being able to do that and code that stuff has been helpful. And then because my background is very much in like how the brain processes emotional information, that's been a big focus for us, because what separates, a reading of a lecture versus a performance on screen is emotion. So if we're making sounds with AI voices that are flat and emotionless, we've failed. So we're really focused on getting the most like expressive and like best possible match to the voice in every situation that we can, and really honing in on that. Rather than doing something quick and okay, we're trying to do it as well as possible in every instance.
Yeah. Because like the human brain must like process things like pitch and loudness and things like that differently.
Mm-hmm.
How are you thinking about, and you spoke about it a little bit, but how are you thinking about that when training the AI to kind of really connect with either the actor or to kind of replace the sound in different ways?
Definitely. So with AI specifically, the way I think about it is there's kind of two pieces to any AI. There's like the network structure that someone's made, or tweaked or built off of, there's tons of things. But then there's the actual data that you use to train that network. And what we've seen in the field kind of to this point is people just throw as much data as possible at a network and see what it can do, and try to go for a very like generalizable, very fast result. But what we're trying to do is really fine tune those things. So we're really considering exactly what sort of data we're putting in. Like, is it expressive enough? Are we giving the systems we've built the tools and the information to actually make this project work in the way that we'd like it to? So yeah, there's a thing called garbage in, garbage out in any AI or like machine learning or data science thing, that doesn't matter how good you create a structure for data analysis. If you give it crap data, well,
Right.
that's what you're going to get on the other side too. So we're really very cognizant of that pitfall.
So is that, I know as we were exploring doing kind of cloning our own voices for kind of an experimental episode, but
Yeah.
it was always these, like other tech startups that say like, hey, we just need 3 seconds or 8 seconds of audio to create your clone.
Yeah.
That's like, you guys are almost doing the opposite, to saying we need almost this encyclopedia of different emotions and scenarios, and because then you have a great recipe or a kind of all the right ingredients as opposed to just an ingredient.
Yeah. It's not necessarily like an encyclopedia, but definitely
Right.
it's a different focus. So there's a couple different ways that like you can clone a voice. And that like 3 seconds of data thing is like, we have this big network that we've trained on tons of data. And what we're trying to do is you give us 3 seconds and our system will try and find something within that trained data that's close. And it'll give something out like that. Or maybe it'll extract some features, and those can do pretty well, but you kind of hit a wall with them after a while, where it's like, oh, at first this seemed okay, but it's not as flexible as I need it. I need it to be sounding like this, and it's not quite there. So yeah.
And just by the proximity and also just the makeup of your team, I mean, AI has had a pretty big impact already in media and entertainment. And
Yeah.
just curious what some of the things that you're seeing of how AI is being leveraged in like movie, TV, video games,
Mm-hmm.
even, and maybe some of the spaces that you're most excited about.
Yeah, it's definitely been, you get more and more use out of it. And with the recent developments by like Adobe, um, using the generative fill in the backgrounds, that's been huge. Obviously, we're all curious to see what Sora actually looks like when it comes out. I'm curious. I don't think it's going to replace standard movie making anytime soon, but it's definitely like another tool in the toolkit. On the audio side, honestly, AI has been used for a long time. even things like noise reduction in audio. There's a company called Isotope that essentially makes an entire like mixing and mastering suite where you can give it your song and like a song you want it to sound like, and it will try and mix it or master it for you. Mastering is kind of like the final step in a song production chain, so getting it ready from the mix stage to sort of the distribution stage. So yeah, and then I think the one I've seen that I've been most excited about is like source separation. So you can give certain networks like an entire song, and it will try and isolate. Here's the drum track, or here's the keys track, or here's the bass,
Right.
or the guitar, or whatever, or the vocals, of course. And that's I think we're going to see more and more of that. That is really useful for DJs making remixes, because rather than needing
Sarah's
to
favorite.
have, right? Everybody loves DJs.
Except for
Except
Sarah.
Yeah. So like rather than needing, you know, the original recording session tracks, you
Right.
can just cut it out later and then remix it on yourself on your own. Yeah.
What do you like when you look at a contemporary song today? I guess what is the percentage of AI that you believe might be being used to produce?
Honestly, I think at the top level, it's not being used maybe as much as you might think. There's always going to be. So actually, we saw a similar thing in retail. So thinking back on our time in VF, it's like um, online shopping has changed the way the retail space works in America, at least. Where it used to be, you go to the mall and there's a bunch of mid-level stores you can hit at, a couple high-end stores. But now it's like if you want the mid-level, you can just order that online, and that's the same. So you can get anything you want delivered to your door, and if it's cheap or okay, like it's ready to go. But at the top level, there's still a benefit to like going to the store and having that experience. And I think there's a similar thing happening in the creative space where like we're sort of seeing like a hollowing out of the middle, where people just starting out might be using AI a lot, and people in the middle probably using it maybe even more as they understand more where to use it. But at the top level, outside of like pitch correction and stuff like that, so like auto tuning or melodyning voices, I think people are mostly using stuff that they already learned how to do, how to build that, and like what are the right ways to build a track. Now, on the music marketing side, I think there's a ton of AI that's been happening, and that's true with any digital marketing. Like finding that audience, getting it to them, and maybe isolating like, oh, this song with X and Y attributes really resonated with this audience, so let's build some more on that space. But yeah, I think it's more guidance rather than building it from the ground up.
Yeah. Ted has like this music dream for a player. Do you want to tell him what you're hoping for and see
Well,
like
Lay
how
it on me,
complicated
yeah.
it is?
well, so we've talked on a past episodes around like Spotify. Like I love Spotify.
Mhm.
But there are times where I don't want to play a playlist. I don't want, like my options right now are hear the songs in order, hear the songs and surprise me in the order, but it's still a playlist.
Mhm.
And some days I just want to put something on where it's not a song I've heard. It's not it might be something newly created based off of kind of what I'm working on at the time. But it might be, more AI generated, influenced by a bunch of different things I'm using, but not necessarily attributable back to them in terms of, like playing like a certain sample, like with a DJ, right? You can kind of play around with the sample and arrangement and all those different kinds of things, but it's also pulling from those recognizable songs. So it's more of just kind of generating things from these sources for my own personal enjoyment.
Yeah, I think we're actually pretty close to that. Have you heard of like Suno AI and other things
Yeah.
like that?
Yep.
It's doing something very similar, trying to. And with Spotify, there should be some features that like try and build essentially an infinite playlist off like a single song.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know I get that sometimes,
Right.
and it works pretty well. Actually, the way they do their like recommendation system is really interesting. So I've gotten a chance to work with that quite a bit over the years because they have an API or application programming interface that they allow anyone to get at. And essentially what they do is like they tag every song with a set of features. So things like, is this instrumental or vocal? Is this like happy or sad? What key is it in? What's the tempo? There's some like genre tags, stuff like
Right.
that. And they use all that data to build those playlists that said, okay, here's one feature or one set of features. Find me some other stuff in a similar space that, based on our data, we think Chad's going to like too. Keep him
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, especially like when you go to stores and you can see who's in the store right now,
yeah.
and it auto builds kind of the experience based off of who's inside. And I know
Yeah.
Sarah might be a little bit more of a purist when it comes to everything we're talking about.
I am a little bit. That's okay. But I'm intrigued by things like that, though. Thinking about like a retail space and thinking about like if, okay, we all walk in and our Spotify somehow like connects and like something's created. And I'm curious too, with like, Chad's music dream is what I call it, but like, creating like he's feeling sad and he wants to run, like, like what kind of playlist would come up, like that type of a thing, or not even playlist, just like a sound.
Get you, yeah, motivate you to
Yeah.
like take a next
Yeah.
step.
If
And
you're in
cry
that
while running.
type of mood for sad, though, because like
She always
there's
puts me in
actually
a box. She always puts me in a box, Jack.
you just want to be a sad running man. I can see it. No, it's funny actually with sad music specifically. There's a lot of mixed research, and I think the science is kind of still out on this. Whether people that are sad want to wallow in that and like give me the saddest song. Like I just broke up with my girlfriend. Like life is over. Nothing's ever going to be the same. I want to dive in deep. Or do I want to like get pumped up and go for a run and like feel better about my life again? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that those are like sort of different types of sadness, and I don't think that everyone is going to get the same music as a win.
Yeah, I'm scared to ask these questions because I might have to lay down on a couch and hear the
We call
response.
him Sad Chad, by the way.
But yeah, but I
It
don't know
rhymes.
why I listen to like Sad Hour on Spotify, and I don't feel like the music is sad, or nor do I feel like I am sad, but just like the more of the emotion behind the music,
Sure.
where it's not like a poppy, I don't know, just like there's a depth to it. Where if I'm, I need to be thinking more strategic or kind of get absorbed or immersed in the work, like that's my like go-to playlist for some reason.
So one theory about like why we like to listen to sad music is it's a little bit more sonically complex. Like happy music is very like tonally aligned. Sadder music has a little bit more natural dissonance in it, and sometimes smarter people enjoy music with more dissonance in it. To say,
Go on.
yeah, right. I figured you like that. But
Yeah.
like kids' music is all like very like bright and happy, and it's simple and easy to latch onto. But
Right.
sort of as you experience more things and develop a more refined taste, you might like stuff that's a little more complicated. And then there's like the social side of it. So I'm not saying this is the case, but if you actually were feeling sad, there's something nice to know that other people have experienced this before, and they wrote a song about it. I can relate to that. It makes me feel better to know that other people have been here before in some way or another. It's like, we're all in this together, to use a hackneyed phrase,
All right. Well, I will send me the invoice for the hourly rates on this. So
yeah.
That's an interesting transition with sadness. But one of the questions I do have is around like the introduction of these tools in Hollywood may make some people sad because they are being replaced by some of these tools. So there's people on the production side, but then there's also, there's production, there's, potentially it could creep into, kind of being able to create actors, like their visualizations, if we're able to also create their audio. So kind of curious your perspective on what's happening in Hollywood.
Yeah. That's a great question. That's something we've all spent a lot of time thinking about. The focus for us is like, we're all creatives too. We get that like AI is cool. It's a great tool and it can like speed up a lot of the process. But I'm of the mind that like, it's not a replacement for people. It's a tool to help us do more stuff. It makes things faster. But one of the things we're working on is like, actually a core guiding principle for us is like the ethical use of AI. And that means for the models we create, if we use someone's data in that, we want to make sure that they're getting attribution. So there's a thing where in like Hollywood productions, sets or like whole production companies are either union or non-union workshops. So if something is a union workshop, then like everyone employed by that has to be in SAG or SAG-AFTRA, and that means they get certain rates and all the stuff that the union developed. So we're trying to do an analog to that to say, let's build a union AI that like SAG is involved with. And then if that gets used, then, there's payouts to the people involved. And like, again, we're making sure that if, if there's a big name who's being used on the production, then they have their sign off rights to say like, I'm okay with this and all that stuff. And that we're not going to use their voice in a non-union thing where they don't have, the rights. So a lot of it is like the devil's kind of in the details about how it gets built, but we're big on, consent, rights attribution, and like payouts. So in the music world, there's a couple companies like BMI or CSAC or ASCAP that anytime a song is played in a public space, they get paid a little bit, and then they pay that out to the artists who actually own the rights. And we think there should be the same kind of thing with like AI, like there was a moment last year during the strike when actors and the union and like the executives were arguing about this kind of stuff. One of the things that was proposed was like, oh, we'll pay you $200 to do a full like scan of your body, and then we can use that for the rest of perpetuity. And I was like, that's crazy. It's fine to say like take a scan of the actor and you can use them for that project or that episode or whatever. Like, yeah, sure. But to say that like we're going to own this forever is crazy. So the way I see this going forward is like people are going to sign off on a project basis, and like for this thing we can use that, and that doesn't mean that you can use the Han Solo AI or whatever in everything ever, unless he explicitly signs off and says like, yeah, you can do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that again, like consent, rights, and attribution is stuff we're going to see more and more of, and I think it's a really good thing to be cognizant of, because it's art, and it's kind of a bummer to see how much or how many people are like okay with, oh, I'll just have a computer make art for me and I don't have to do it anymore. It's like, no, this is like a deeply human thing to make this stuff, and like you should enjoy it, and it should involve that. If you want to use AI to make some things easier for it, great, like reduce the friction in the process, but it's not a replacement, it's a tool.
Yeah. So what are like kind of the biggest ways, just kind of as like the big takeaways around AI shaping the future of film and TV, kind of both like the positives and, potentially some negatives?
Yeah. The positives, definitely, it's going to give more tools to more people. So like right now doing what you could do with special effects now, like with anyone with $50 in a couple hours, is crazy. It's advanced so much compared to even where it was 10 or 15 years ago. And that's really cool because that allows more filmmakers to do more art and like do it faster and better. And I think we'll see the same thing with the AI stuff in general, that it's going to expand out the amount of tools that are at people's you know at their within their reach. Mm-hmm. And I think the pitfalls are going to be like when stuff gets into the wrong hands and people start using this technology for things that weren't signed off on. I think we've already seen some of that. Like you heard probably that George Carlin podcast thing. Mm-hmm. There was Scarlett Johansson got used by some company in an ad without her consent and leveled a very justifiable lawsuit. I think that like, when you do this stuff without approval by the people whose art you're kind of using to make it, that's a pitfall. And I honestly think we're going to see a lot of people fall from grace from that. We have already seen a couple, and it's going to continue going as people dig into more like, well, how were these networks trained? Where did all this data come from? Like, were the people contacted in any way to say, we're going to use your art to make this? And I think we're going to see a sea change in the next few years where people are much more aware of that. And we have to be more careful about, where the data came from, where it's going.
So one of the things we like to do to help our audience is to sometimes encourage them to go out and try different tools. So coming from kind of the sound space, including Dialogger.ai, What are some of the tools that you would encourage our listeners to go out and play with right now?
I feel like the one that's probably the most accessible right now would be like 11 Labs or something. They also, I think, have, I guess, the second most funding after OpenAI for this space. There's some stuff you can play around with there that's pretty cool. And you'll see it's kind of like to give them 3 seconds, maybe get something close.
Yeah.
And if they have, the standard like newscaster American English or even maybe British, it'll work pretty well. But what we found is, those things don't always get accents. So really, like, what I like to do is to try and break that stuff. Is like see where it fails. Like, where is this thing not doing well enough yet? And that's what I would encourage people to do. Is like go try stuff out, see where it's working, and see where it's completely falling apart. Because that's where, I think that you can get some fun stuff. And also, like, that's the chaotic artist part of me speaking. Like, well, let's make something insane that doesn't work, and then draw art from that chaos. Like, that's fun.
Well, that's great advice, and this is a really fun conversation to learn more about the world of sound and how you're working with AI to kind of, bring the next generation of tools to Hollywood.
Yeah, thanks you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.
Well, that was a really cool interview with Jack. That was the first person we've talked to that really kind of understands sound in that way.
Yeah, that was great. Plus, his name is pretty amazing. I also have a friend named Jason Bourne, so I feel like these two people should meet.
You know someone named Jason Bourne for real?
For real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Can you imagine a meeting of Jason Bourne and Dr. Jack Payne?
I love it. We should have them both on.
This should happen. This should happen.
That sounds like an awesome podcast.
Yeah.
Well, it was really cool. It was really cool hearing about Dialogger, thinking about, for the production companies and how, it's saving them quite a bit. But it also kind of feeds into that thing too, where it's like, okay, if the artist signs on too, being able to let them use their likeness, kind of related to the Twigs article or the headline we were talking about. But it's really cool. It's just interesting how they can get that to work, and they don't have to come back and re-record, and especially if you get like a really emotional, you got like you're really feeling that line or that scene, and not having to redo that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different applications. I mean, obviously you got the kind of the first person experience of watching a film and experiencing like that. But then, I mean, even just podcasts, since everything's transcribed, if I could have a different actor or actress essentially read, like, the podcast is coming from them, even though they're not the one speaking, or I'm reading an article, or I'm reading my email and it's coming through as that person's voice. I just think there's some really interesting applications for this. So, if you're slacking me or I'm getting an email, I'm obviously reading it. I don't know about you. I have like an inner dialogue where I'm like actually hear you in the email, like it's coming through. That would be a pretty cool experience. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that would be cool. I don't know if I'd want it to be like my likeness with some, or like kind of my thoughts in somebody else's like AI body.
Right. Yeah.
But I definitely like the idea of it like being, for myself, and just also to kind of play around with that and see, because I haven't played around with it. Part of me just wants to know how that feels to be able to train it and then see it and kind of experience it. I feel like I'll have more to say once I can actually see something like that. But there's a lot of possibility and a lot of different applications. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Verve. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday.